All right, we may have some folks trickling in still, but just to get started, it's just after the noon hour. So let's go ahead and get our webinar underway. Good afternoon. It is now afternoon. I'm Karina Henderson, Senior Account Supervisor at Kane Communications Group, which is a public relations and marketing firm based here in Milwaukee. Thank you all so much, panelists and other participants, for joining today's webinar on Mind Matters, addressing youth mental health and trauma in back to school season. As students in Milwaukee County prepare to head back to school, the spotlight is once again on the mental health challenges that many young individuals face. 3 out of 5 Wisconsin students have reported experiencing one or more serious mental health issues, including depression, anxiety, self-harm, or suicidal ideation. This highlights the need for comprehensive responses and resources. Wraparound Milwaukee and Children's Community Mental Health Services emphasizes the significance of addressing these challenges head-on and highlights the availability of mental health support services for youth, young adults, and their families experiencing serious emotional, behavioral, and mental health challenges. Wraparound Milwaukee focuses on strength-based individualized care by providing a comprehensive and flexible array of services to address not only the immediate mental health concerns, but also the underlying factors that contribute to these challenges. Today, we will speak with a panel of clinical psychologists, a clinical school liaison, and a peer and family support specialist from Wraparound Milwaukee, who will shed light on youth mental health challenges, trauma, and practical ways to prepare for the return to school. Identifying when a student might require assistance is crucial for their overall mental well-being and their academic success. Recognizing that educators, parents, caregivers, or community members might need to guide young individuals towards support, it's vital that you are all aware and informed about the mental health challenges youth and young adults may be facing, and that you know about available resources they can turn to for support. We are joined here today by a panel of women from Wraparound Milwaukee who work daily with youth and families in Milwaukee County, experiencing mental health challenges and ensuring they find the support that they need. These folks on the panel today are Rada Durcha, a clinical school liaison, Dr. Abby Nowak-Haggis, a clinical psychologist, Dr. Courtney Weston, also a clinical psychologist, and Jill Klopper, a parent, peer, and family support specialist. Welcome to all of you. We're so excited to have you as part of today's discussion. Our goal for the audience is that by the end of this discussion, you're going to walk away with valuable insights on how you can help youth and young adults experiencing mental health challenges, especially as they return to school, and where they can seek assistance to overcome these challenges. Just so you know, we are recording the session and we will post it to the Milwaukee County Department of Health and Human Services YouTube channel and to Wraparound's website. So it will be available afterwards as a resource for you and for some of your colleagues and coworkers. We'll share this link with you once it's available following the session. I kind of said this before we got started officially, but if you have any inquiries beyond the questions that were asked when you registered for the webinar, please feel free to put them in the chat. We'll address as many as we can throughout the session. Otherwise, we have some assistants working in the background who are going to be able to respond as they can throughout the webinar. And those lovely ladies are Stephanie Smith and Liz Karnowski from Kane Communications Group. So with all that introduction, now let's actually talk about today's subject matter. Dr. Weston, I think you're going to be a great first person to answer this first question. News is currently trending around youth and young adult mental health, with statistics showing that youth trauma, depression, and anxiety are rising. What are you seeing now in your work that may be different from previous years? And do these trends that we're seeing in the news hold true for Milwaukee County?
Yeah, I mean, these trends are certainly consistent with what we're seeing in Milwaukee County. Young people are feeling more persistently sad and hopeless. This can lead to suicidal thoughts and behaviors. Overall, just experiencing a greater sense of loneliness and isolation. And these trends even predate the pandemic, but I think the pandemic really brought a lot of these issues to light. Youth are less connected to their community. There's less participation in different community organizations, clubs, extracurricular activities. And these issues can be magnified by social media. While social media can be a wonderful tool to connect, it can also lead to youth feeling worse about themselves and about their lives and more disconnected from others. A key difference we're also seeing now is this generation of youth is more open to discussing mental health issues, which is an important aspect of bringing these issues to light and getting them the support that they need.
Yeah, I think we all feel that two sides of the same coin when it comes to things like social media. So some positive and negatives there. Rada, do you have insight as to what you're seeing within Milwaukee County?
Yeah, so just to add to what Dr. Weston was saying, in terms of working with some of the schools within Milwaukee County, definitely noticing some increase in trends in terms of like suicidal ideation and students that are struggling with suicidal thoughts and suicidal attempts. So that's definitely been on the rise. It's not a lot different from pre-pandemic stage, but suicidal rates have been on the rise by 40% increase over the last decade. I don't have the most latest statistics, but it's the second leading cause of death amongst youth ages 10 to 19. So that's pretty high, right? And 1 in 6 youth or students within the state of Wisconsin struggles with suicidal ideation. So that's definitely been on the rise, and we've been working really hard on like increasing that awareness and utilizing suicide prevention trainings to help community identify like warning signs and things to do so that we can kind of help keep those numbers at bay. And some of our schools have also utilize some trainings in terms of their clinical staff, like school psychologists and social workers, to help them understand some of those symptoms and warning signs and how to address that within schools. But that's definitely been on the rise as well.
Dr. Noah-Hagus, I know Dr. Weston had talked about the pandemic and the effects it had. What effects are you seeing with the pandemic? Dr. Weston mentioned some of this predates it, but certainly that's had a big impact on youth mental health.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we are still trying to understand the fallout of, all of the things that everybody, like all of us, kind of went through with the pandemic and isolation and being able to, or having to stay at home. So I think we're still trying to pull apart all of the different pieces and ways that our families in our community and throughout the country, right, have been how their mental health and well-being has been impacted by that. We're still seeing a lot of those ripples, kind of similar to what Dr. Weston was saying about the social media thing. There's also, though, like positive and negatives about the thing, which is also very interesting to see that there are, some youth for whom the ability to do virtual school, for example, right, is a blessing and a boon and actually like makes them more successful. And of course, then we have the other side of the coin, students who really benefited from all of the socialization and supports and extra, opportunities to connect with peers and things that they liked and kind of get them away from the screens and all those things, who really did much better when they were in a school, like in a in-person school setting. And as schools are transitioning, I think, back to different levels of in-person versus not, and the idea that like not in-person is even an option for some students, right? It's sort of opening up this whole new world of conversation about what it means to go back to school. So we're definitely seeing a lot of families and providers and the community kind of struggling with like how to best meet the needs of as many students and families as possible as we do this.
And that's a great transition to our next question, which I'd like to start with Jill on this as a parent here. Jill, what are youth and families experiencing as they transition back to school? I mean, Anecdotally, I've got one who's excited and one who is full of anxiety about the transition, but more broadly, what's going on with youth and families as they're waiting for back to school season to start?
Well, it's like you said, all kids are different. And I know some kids, especially with some of the families that I work with, they have not had a really good experience with school. It's been a real challenge, and school should be a safe place for them. So I try really hard when I work with parents, because I know myself as a parent, I've always encouraged them to get to know the teacher and help that teacher get to know your child, because you know your child and your youth. And you need to speak up, learn what the school has to offer, work with your family and work with the youth and the teachers and the school to provide the best support they can. Ask questions, work as a team. I also encourage parents to really learn a lot about the challenges that their youth is facing with mental health challenges or whatever. Educate yourself. You know, we have some great programs through Wraparound for youth mental health first aid, where it's a real simple process where you can learn how to talk to a youth if you think there's some things that are going on. And I wish some of that I would have known as a parent too, to watch for those warning signs earlier on. But I also run a Hope Circle for parents twice a month, and that is a really good time for us to meet as parents, just to kind of share what we can do to make school easier for our kids. And this last month, we've talked a lot about focusing on how to teach the teacher about our kids, you know, let them learn what they're like, what works for them, what doesn't work, and kind of work as a team to support them and really encourage them in school. So that's kind of what I've been doing.
Yeah, that's great. And I think you hit on such an important point that everyone is really working together to ensure these students' success. And so I want to ask the rest of the panel to build on what Jill just was talking about, of how can parents, educators, and other caregivers who are on this call today create a supportive environment for youth who are struggling with some of these challenges as they do return to school.
I mean, just to build off of what Jill was saying, that collaboration is really key. Relationship building, not just among students and teachers, but how can teachers connect with parents and build that relationship for them? And how can they connect with other professionals that students might be working with, whether it's the wraparound or other support systems that they have, so that they can ensure that best collaboration and that student needs are put up front. And I think it's also important to talk a little bit about, you know, what parents are experiencing with all the changes that are happening and all the realities of our world that are unfortunate, right? In terms of some pretty traumatic things that happen within the schools or you know, in our community, right? That are pretty scary, and post-pandemic scares, right? That anxiety is really high for everyone. So kind of how can we provide that reassurance and empathize with our parents as well, and teachers as well, and how can we all collaborate and work together? So I think that relationship building from the start is a really, really big deal to ensure that our youth needs are being met.
Yeah, that core thread of empathy throughout is so important in creating that supportive team environment. One question we had prior to the start of the webinar that came through came from an audience member. Could you please comment on the importance of having a way for youth to contribute to their families, school, and community? And I know Dr. Weston, I believe it was you who said something about how youth are less involved in programs and in activities, and maybe there's a connection with helping them feel empowered to try to combat some of these mental health challenges.
Yeah, I know we've talked a lot about just connectiveness and the importance of that. And so, you know, helping youth build healthy relationships with each other and, you know, with the school staff and with other community members, finding some opportunities for mentorship, just really looking for those little things that we can do every day in our interactions with youth to help build this, you know, cultivate a sense of belonging for them.
I would
Abby,
Kids,
you
can you
cut
hear
out
me?
for a second there, Abby. Can you
Oh, no.
start back over? Technology
I
always
will
right.
try. I'm so sorry. Can you guys hear me now?
Good. Yep, we're
Okay.
good.
No, I was just gonna
All right.
want to, oh, am I out again?
You cut out again. I'm so sorry.
It might be helpful maybe if Abby turns off her camera and then maybe we can hear
I
you.
think that's a
Might help.
great idea. Yeah.
I will try that. I am so sorry.
Uh-huh.
Is that any better?
Yes. Thank you.
No, I was just going to add that, you know, else in the sense of having a desire to contribute and feel like they have. And so when we talk about combating some of the anxiety and depression and stuff that our young people struggle with, one of the ways that we can do that is to help them see their self-worth and their value. And one of the ways that they do that is by their contribution to their community, and whether that's a school community or their neighborhood or their church or, you know, however, even if it is just very small things, I think that's a really easy thing to overlook as having a really powerful impact to see, hey, you know, your grades might not be great, but you're always really kind to so-and-so in the hallway. Those kinds of things that make young people feel like they have value and they're contributing to the world around them.
Yeah.
I think that's a great point. And just to kind of add to that is like that, you know, words matter, language matters. So how we communicate with our youth and how we let them express themselves is really important. But also to add to some of the school-based stuff is, you know, letting them speak up at the IEP, if they have an IEP or if there is some kind of collaboration going on, have the youth be present in those meetings and have them say what's going on. Like their voice matters, and like really amplifying that is also a really important piece to it.
Yeah, when things keep happening to you, things that are unpredictable, like a pandemic, that sense of having some control over what happens with you can really combat that sense of helplessness. So those are great points. Another question that we had prior to the start of the webinar from the audience is, what strategies can schools implement to help students stay in the classroom?
Just building off of kind of like what Dr. Nowak said as well, like, you know, have them have their voice be heard, build that relationship with the teacher, right? See what interests them. How can we connect so that they can be excited about going to class, so that they can feel like they're being empowered, and they can kind of get that sense of hope in terms of like, what are my future goals and aspirations? So really building off of that, I think, is important, but looking at also what else is going on that might be contributing to their lack of engagement or desire not to go to the classroom. Is there something else going on? So being kind of that, you know, having that investigative mind as a teacher, you see them most of the time. You probably see them more than, you know, the parents see them if they're working a lot of, you know, you see that kid a lot. So you might notice some things that might be minor that you're like, let me just check in. So just having that, hey, I'm concerned about you. What's going on? Just, you know, having that, that sense of like, okay, I care about you. I want to see what's happening. So going a little step further to see what's actually preventing that, you know, that student from attending classroom, I think is an important thing to look into.
I'm going to go off camera to talk because I don't want to repeat what just happened. But I think that what Rada just said makes a ton of sense. I think the part where we remain open to the many different ways that people and young people are communicating what they need, right, is really important. And it's so, I can't even imagine how challenging that must be in a classroom full of 20, 25, 30 students, right? Like that sounds exhausting. And at the same time, right, like making it as easy as possible for young people to communicate their needs, right? So like I don't even know what options might be available to some teachers and in some classrooms, but like I know that when we speak with families about bettering communication in the home, sometimes we tell them write notes down, like write it down and back and forth that way, right? If you can't say it out loud, if you can't get it out. So just being as creative as possible with those opportunities to communicate, because most of the time I think that you're going to find that students are going to want to, they're going to appreciate the opportunity to communicate. They're not, may not always take it, but you know, knowing it's there is definitely a good first step.
To
And
add to that, you know, I would share that showing a lot of flexibility and creativity in ways that we can re-engage some of our youth. I know when youth have not attended school for a period of time, that school reintegration process can be very difficult. And so having some flexibility with what attending school might look like for that specific youth, whether it's going certain days of the week or certain hours, and slowly building their way back up, because otherwise it can be a very daunting and stressful experience as they're attempting to make that transition. And in addition, you know, the more that we can build into curriculums, the more we can build space for learning healthy habits and practices, and, you know, psychoeducation around different types of like social emotional issues, and providing them with the tools that they can use to cope with the stress could also be very beneficial.
that's a great transition into our next question, which was also one that we got from the audience prior to the start of the webinar. And it focuses more too on the work that Wraparound does, and how you all in this room and the program that you're part of can help support the supporters through a lot of this. So the question is, how is Wraparound measuring mental health status and coping abilities in students? And I know, Dr. Weston, you were kind of talking about how progress looks a little bit different for every kid. But if somebody could jump in and talk about how Wraparound is measuring that progress.
I can
I
take it.
think, oh, go ahead.
I think it's tough to say, because as Dr. Weston said, like every family is different, every youth is different. The part where we see that live out right in the classroom, in the homes, right? So like speaking to the idea of like how, you know, helping kids remain in the classroom, right? For some kids, 5 minutes is a win on a Monday, right? And for some kids, the bar is higher. And so I think when it comes to like how we're assessing or measuring, it's a very individualized experience, because we have to take what we have to take into consideration where that youth is starting from, where that family's starting from. And only then can we measure like where progress is going and where we can expect it to go. So if a young person's like, I give an example that's I think very pertinent, right? So if we talk to a young person about coping skills and they're like, well, I smoke weed, that's my coping skill. Okay. Our goal is to find you one other that we can have you start working on, right? And that's going to be a mark of progress, right? Where there might be other young people where the goal looks different, where it's more like, okay, you've got 50 coping skills and let's figure out how we help you actually use them. So measurement's kind of a tricky thing, because there's almost never a direct comparison from one family, from one youth, from one student to the next one.
Coping skills you can use in school are also helpful. All right, anyone else want to jump in on this question?
I mean, just to add to what Dr. Nowak was saying, is it's essentially very unique and individualized to each person, right? And sometimes it can look like, you know, depending on severity and of their mental health needs, you know, if we're getting them back to connecting with other individuals that they were connecting prior to having, you know, problems or issues or concerns that they are now experiencing, we can get them back to like doing that some of the time, or at least just attending school like a couple of times a week, or you know, their grades might be lowered, but they're attending at least. That's progress, right? Let's be realistic. If someone's struggling with like really, really severe mental health and we're getting them back out of that house, they were severely depressed or their anxiety was really high, but now they're at least going back and kind of seeing that teacher and saying hello instead of not attending at all. That in a sense can be progress. So I think it's important to celebrate even those small wins where it doesn't feel like ooh, this is progress. This kid is still failing some classes, or, they're still getting D's, but, they're attending, they're showing progress in a different way. They talk to a student, they built a relationship with someone now, finally. All of those things are worth celebrating and acknowledging, so that progress looks a lot different for everyone, as Dr. Noack said.
Mhm. Jill, maybe you can hop in on this next one, just to get us started. And we've talked about some of this, but just give us an overview. What are some of the common mental health challenges that young people are facing right now? And how can we, in all of the roles of the folks who are on this webinar, how can we all recognize the signs of these issues?
Well, a lot of it comes with, it's individual, again, like everybody was saying. We need to know our children, and we need to be able to help the schools know our children and watch for that. I would imagine that I see a lot of anxiety with the kids, not wanting to go out, not feeling connected to things, and that is sad, because we need to feel connected. So I know that we do work a lot with that, is with the families that I work with, trying to find them outlets, places they can go as a family, things they can do as a family, encouraging open communication. So that's kind of where I go with the families, is learning how to talk to one another and communicate and be honest. I think there's a real challenge with some of that with kids. They're just not sure what they can say. And then sometimes as parents, it's hard to reach out for help because you're not sure where that's going to take you.
Yeah.
So
I think you made a great point in that, and you or any of our other panelists can build on this, about how parents know their kids. And what are some of those signs that, and another panelist I know was talking earlier about how, the caregivers, teachers, other resource providers also spend a lot of time during the day with kids and can recognize some of those patterns. So what are the things that we can look for in behavioral changes that students are showing that can help maybe tip us off to larger problems going on, even if they're not talking about them directly?
sometimes I think too, we think about hygiene, whether or not they're, they used to do their hair, they don't do it anymore. Maybe don't do their nails like they used to, change their clothing style so that they don't look like they used to. Maybe they're not going out as often as they used to. They stay home, they stay in their room, they isolate. Those are things that I would have watched for as a parent, that kind of thing. That's different from what they normally do, whether they're, they usually go out and play video games, but now they're always doing it in their room or somewhere away from everybody. So those would be some of the things I would look for. And I have talked to my parents about that too.
All right, I do
Bill summarized that well, is that we're really looking for a change in their normal functioning or their normal behavior. And so that could be so many different things. It's just important to kind of check in with them and see what they think and just ask them about it, and what might be going on with them, to see if maybe they already, have something in mind that they think would work to help them as well.
I think that's a really good point, because so many times with youth, they're changing their clothing style, they're changing their habits, they're changing their interests, and it's easy to just chalk that up to they're going through a phase, but using it it's a great point to start a conversation. And so maybe it is just a phase, maybe it is just their interest changing, but maybe it is something deeper, so that conversation can't hurt, right? Checking in. All right, so for wraparound, just to, it would be great for us to be able to make sure that the folks who are on this call understand what resources you provide for youth, young adults, and their families who may be struggling with trauma and with mental health challenges. And so that when you all who are participating here and listening in see some of these signs, recognize some of these issues happening in youth that you work with, so that you know what Wraparound does and what resources are available to you to connect these kids and families with mental health resources. So if somebody could just talk a little bit more about Wraparound in general and what services you provide.
Sure, I can tackle that a little bit here, and anybody can jump in. But Wraparound basically offers a variety of services to kids and families in Milwaukee County, ages 5 to 24, essentially. So I think that's a big misconception. Oftentimes people assume it's under 18 youth. We can serve youth that are over the age of 18 up to the age of 24. And there's different programs that we provide, we have REACH, CCS, regular CCS core program. Some are designed to treat more severe mental illnesses like psychosis and early onset of schizophrenia. And basically it's an additional benefit to their state insurance. So if anyone is looking kind of like noticing signs and symptoms with their youth and kiddos that live in Milwaukee County, they can connect with our resource and referral line. And the process is fairly simple. Once they connect with someone, they'll kind of go through some of the questionnaires over the phone with the family, with the parent, and connect them with one of our options counselors. And our options counselors do a really good job at connecting with the family and meeting with them in their home or wherever the family is comfortable with to get that process started. So they'll go over some of the kind of assessments or things to kind of look into to see if they qualify for any of the programs. And it's basically family choice, right? So they might qualify for certain programs, but all of them are pretty much voluntary. So I think that's an important thing to also remember, that, it is their choice and it's up to the youth and the family to, whether or not they want to enroll in the programs. And the options counselors kind of go through all of those options with the family. And then once they've, deemed that they're eligible, they're able to then connect them with a care coordinator of sorts. And every program has that team member, a care coordinator. And that's basically kind of like your navigation system, your person that you go to that kind of helps you connect with all the services that you might need. So it's very much individualized, right? So every family has different needs and different things and goals that they want to work on. So that care coordinator will kind of get that ball rolling for the family. So that might look like, they might need medication adjustments, or they might need a medication evaluation. So they might connect them with psychiatry or a therapist or a mentor or, parent peer support specialist. So it depends on what the family needs and is looking for. So it's very much individualized, and to kind of help that process started and to ease them into that transition. So, because for a lot of our families, they're working with different systems with different supports. It can look really scary for, all these strangers, all these people to come into their home or wherever they're meeting. So they do that, like kind of sort of they offer an opportunity for them to have a warm handoff when they do a slow introduction to that care coordinator or a team member, so that they can ease into that transition. And of course, we encourage collaboration between different community members and school support, so that the families and the new team that's working with the youth and family can kind of best collaborate and kind of put those youth's needs first at a forefront. So it's kind of it in a nutshell.
Great nutshell. Nicely done. So I mean, overall, there are a lot of options. And, kind of like we were talking about, how important it is to look at progress and to look at issues individually, that Wraparound Milwaukee does provide that kind of support, where it's individualized, it's really customized to each student and their family and what they need, their individual circumstances. So I think that's just an important point to make.
And just to add to that, if, families calling our resource and referral line, and let's say, they may not need the support through Wraparound, the options counselors or, coordinators that they talk to on the phone can also provide them like a variety of resources within the community. Maybe they just need an outpatient therapist, and they can give them kind of like a list of, these are some folks that are within the community that you can connect with, or other resources that they might need. So they can just call that resource and referral number just to kind of get an idea of what's out there. What do I need? Or, they might need to apply for insurance benefits. They can kind of let them know, okay, this is what you need to do, things of that nature. So that line is really good at kind of like helping them sort out and figure out what, the next steps might be for them.
I was going to add too, can you guys hear me?
Yep.
switched to a different Wi-Fi situation, so hopefully that works better. We're gonna try it. I was going to add to what Rada said, which is that all very true, and also like the program is very focused on the youth and the family as a whole. So it's absolutely meant not just to treat and to help support the youth's mental health, but the family's health as an entity, as a unit, right? So that's why we have services that support the parents. That's why we do things to bring schools to the table to support too, because we really want to, at some point, help the family as a whole function better, to give that all back to them and say, here, you guys are good to go. You don't need us anymore. Like, you've built the skills, you've done the work, like, you've got this, right? So that's really the goal, is to get as much as we can, right, to support families to move into that space where they feel confident and empowered to do what feels right and best for them, right? So that's a big piece of that wraparound program too. It's not just the providers that we have access to, but helping the family build their own network, their own resource, from whatever it needs to look like.
That's excellent. I know Stephanie has been putting the resource and referral line in the chat a couple times, as well as a link to find out more. We'll get on the screen here shortly a little bit more on how families can connect with Wraparound for that support. And there's the resource and referral line that Rada mentioned, and also there's going to be a QR code once we get that on the screen. I wanted to emphasize one thing in what you all were saying, is this programming is voluntary and all assessments are done at no cost, correct? So that's another, I know once you start into the talk about health care support, dollar signs start appearing in everybody's vision as a possible barrier. So that's one great thing about Wraparound as well. I was also, just while we're on housekeeping real quick before we move on to the next question, I was just informed that the chat is somehow disabled. So if you've been trying to chat us with anything, please just use the Q&A function and we should be able to get any additional questions and try to work those in. So you've got some of the resources in the chat, but if you have additional questions or comments, please work them into the Q&A. So, all right, back to our programming. And that's a great summary of Wraparound and what options families have. But we all know that there are some parents who might be a little bit reluctant to asking for additional support from their school or from other sources, especially if their children are experiencing trauma, and parents may be reluctant to have that kind of aired and be a conversation that they have with other folks in schools and other places. How does Wraparound provide support for parents who might be in that situation?
Well, that's kind of what I can do, because I've been down that road. I did not want that help either in the beginning, because you have that fear going to judge your parenting skills, or, make you feel like you made a big mistake. And as it turns out, that's not the way it works out at all. So they were very encouraging and supportive. And when parents have those questions, I try to give them as much information about our journey as possible, because it was a journey of success and support and encouragement. And so I want other families to know that isn't, it's not a place of judgment, it's a place of support and hope. So that's kind of where I step in when they have parents that might not be as engaging as they had hoped. So that's what I try to do as a parent peer support, because I know that feeling.
Yeah, that's a great resource to have. You hit on, I think as parents, sometimes we are our own harshest critics, where we judge ourselves worse than anyone else. And to emphasize that this is a place of open and acceptance and solutions based. That's wonderful. And especially with folks like you, Jill, who have been there. It's great.
Just to add to what Jill was saying, this is what we kind of advocate with that family voice matters. Parents are the experts, your kiddos best. So we really want to advocate and echo that voice, but also along those lines, when it comes to working with teachers and school staff, right? They sometimes encounter similar concerns too, like, well, I don't know how to approach this parent. They just don't want anything to do with, me letting them know about their kid struggling. And that could be for a variety of reasons, as Jill kind of stated, that fear, you're opening up such a vulnerable wound, right? Letting someone not only to see your problems, if you will, but also into your home, which is your, sacred space. So we need to be aware of that and need to be respectful and honored that someone is letting us in such vulnerable state, right? In such vulnerable state, space. So that, I think that's important for all of us to kind of remember and echo that. But also when we're working with teachers and school staff, kind of providing that, okay, how can I, as a teacher, connect with that parent and just kind of come with that voice of concern, like we would with the student, like, yeah, I'm just concerned about your kiddo, they're just not the same anymore. So I know there's other, you may not want the support from the school right now, but I know there's other folks in the community. Let me give you their information. And I think sometimes parents also get, worried about, are we part of the system? Are we there to, to take their kids away from them? And that's absolutely not the case. So separating the two is really, really important as well.
I did want to end this question. We've already started to answer it, but I think it's an important one for us to focus on, which is the issue of stigma surrounding mental health challenges. And, again, those older perceptions of what it means like to reach out for help. And maybe that is something that can mark a child, for a long time, or can affect their ability to lead successful, fulfilling lives. And that's really not the case for especially those of you who are here to support these kids and their families. But there still is that stigma. And sometimes it exists still in institutions and in school systems and in things that are still there for kids to help them. So how can we start tackling that stigma? How can we address it again when kids are in front of us who clearly need more support, need a little bit of help, need some check-ins? How can we start having those conversations?
Well, I think, those that are in the position to really be a model for these youth, they can model that openness to discussing these issues and normalize the process of seeking help. Showing them that it's okay to ask for help and that we all need help at different points of our lives. Sometimes sharing a little about your own struggles, and just really connecting with them on that level to validate their experience, and then, connecting them with, additional help if needed.
And I think this helps too, right? Just having an open conversation about mental health and what does that mean for all of us. And as Dr. Weston said, we all have struggles. We all have our own mental health needs. You don't have to have a mental health diagnosis per se to be mentally unhealthy, but we all need to have our mental health in check, right? Brain health is very important. So having that conversation become part of a normal routine, I think is really important. So normalizing that for everyone, not just our students, just everyone within our community, right? So that we can all be more comfortable in terms of talking about our own struggles and, getting then support that we might need is a big part of it.
I would add too that the normalizing the fear and the vulnerability, right? We have an entire staff of people at Wraparound, right, who have been immersed in mental health and sort of the ins and outs of how it works. And that doesn't we're not then immune to like the vulnerability that comes when we meet with our own therapist or need help with our own issues, right? And so normalizing that piece of it too is that like this is not easy for anybody, right? Even those of us it should be easy for, it really is not. And that's a human thing, you know. A lot of this stuff is very normal and just part of the human experience, right? Coping with stress, overcoming obstacles, resilience in the face of barriers, right? Those are human experiences that we all work through, right? It's just some people need a little extra help with them.
I know we talked about empathy before, and that's part of it, is having empathy for yourself as well and modeling that behavior. That's really key. We had a question that came in before the webinar about our teachers required to take trauma-informed training. And I wanted to ask that alongside with just knowing what trainings are available that can help folks working with youth to identify these needs and support them.
I mean, I think that varies based on like school districts, what kind of trainings they offer. I know with some of our bigger school districts, you know, there's a lot of trainings on maybe suicide prevention, or maybe trauma-informed care with, you know, certain professionals. I don't know how deep it goes in terms of, you know, what teachers are exactly required to do, but that's definitely a, you know, something to inquire within your supervisors, if you will. But through Wraparound, we have been fortunate enough to kind of get some grant funding through, you know, through SAMHSA or, you know, other state entities. And we do offer some trainings on our end. Jill and myself are both suicide prevention trainers, and we do offer those trainings free of charge to our community. We have our care coordinators attend them so that they can understand and recognize some of those warning signs and things that they can do, you know, to help when they're working with youth that might be struggling with some suicidal ideation or have had history of suicide attempts. We do the same for the community. We've actually done some trainings, you know, with, you know, some church organizations, if you will. So if anyone is, you know, interested, or, you know, their organization, you know, has interest in that, please feel free to connect with us. And we're more than happy to connect with you and our training team to see how we can kind of help provide that as well. So on our end, we do offer some trainings, and they're always free of charge. And we offer some lunch and learns with some of our wonderful clinicians here, and some that aren't on this webinar right now. So keep an eye out for those, and you can kind of be part of our mailing registry list for some of those as well. And they might pertain to trauma-informed care or other things as well.
What is the best way to connect with folks in Wraparound for those options?
I would say they can connect with our resource and referral line, and then ask for one of our you know, trainers, and you know, they can say that they heard about this, and then we can take it from there.
One question that came through from the audience, and Stephanie is going to share that resource and referral line link. But in the meantime, there was a question, could there be some clarification on what the REACH, CCS, and other programs are and how they're different from each other? I know, Radha, you went through a lot of information in a short time about so many programs that are available. If you or somebody else could kind of unpack some of those and go into a little bit more detail.
Sure, I can kind of touch base a little bit on that, and if I kind of don't give enough, please fill in the rest of you guys. So we have REACH, CCS, and our regular CCS programs, and they're a little bit different in a sense that, you know, our regular CCS program is kind of like a step down, like our lowest tier program, but also yet are the highest tier program, because within our CCS program, we also have our core program, which stands for Coordinated Opportunities for Recovery and Empowerment. And that program particularly works with young adults that have struggled with early onset of psychosis, have had their first episode of psychosis, or are at a clinical high risk for developing psychosis. So it's very unique, and in a sense that it only works with those individuals. And then the people that are involved in that program get a team of 5 people that are already embedded within a program, like the care coordinator, therapist, peer specialist, employment and school specialist, and a psychiatrist. So it's part of the CCS program, but it's very unique in a sense that, you know, it only works with these individuals. While our regular CCS kind of works with, individuals that, might not have that high level of a need, and they will get a care coordinator. And if they need a therapist or other connection with services, that care coordinator can connect them with those other services. And then we have our REACH program, which deals with youth up to the age of 18 versus our core program deals with the youth up to the age of 24. And it's part of the HMO Wraparound network. So it's a little bit different because you become part of the HMO. So some things change insurance wise for them versus the CCS program. So that's kind of a little bit of a difference. And within the REACH program, they get the care coordinator as well. It's a little bit more intense than your regular CCS, but they can also get like a crisis worker through REACH, through our REACH program, and other options as well. And within the REACH program, we work with a variety of youth that struggle with a variety of mental health needs, and there's certain criteria that they need to meet before they can, enroll into the REACH program, if you will. Options counselors do a really good job at kind of going through all of that. That's why they meet with families to make sure that they're eligible. They have to have like some mental health history, some previous, history when it comes to that to be able to qualify. So there's some qualifications that need to be met before they can enroll in some of the programs.
Yeah, families don't need to know ahead of time which program they need. That's why we sort of tell it. Can you guys hear me? Gosh darn it.
Yeah.
That's why we tell everybody to call the resource and referral line and to speak to the options counselors, is because that's their job, is to help the family talk about what they're looking for, what their concerns are, some of that qualification stuff that Rada mentioned. So families don't need to know already what they need going into it. Like, part of that first step is trying to figure out what's going to be a good fit.
There's always in local government, and I worked in local government, there's that alphabet soup of acronyms that you have to swim through, and happily there are experts to help those families with that. And there's more information about a lot of these programs on the website as well. So if you, as resource providers, as folks who work with youth and families on a daily basis, want to find out, get out your phone while it's up on the screen and scan that QR code to hop right to that very long URL. Again, county government. Or just call the resource and referral line, and they can help you connect with a little bit more information so that you're more familiar with these programs when you're talking about them with families and youth. We have just a couple minutes left until the hour is up. And so I just wanted to go through and ask all the panelists, we talked about a broad range of issues today, a broad range of solutions, resources, things to look out for, some really great tips, I hope, for the folks who are on this webinar, who wanted to find out more about how they can help be advocates for youth and family mental health and connect them with the resources that are available. So I'd just like each panelist to weigh in on, if you had one takeaway from today that you wanted to give the folks on this webinar, one thing to really keep in mind, what would that one thing be that you really want to help them have top of mind?
I would say for me, connection is key. Like, if there's one thing that you can take away from this experience, you don't have to have all these titles behind your name. You don't have to be a clinician. You don't have to be a professional in a sense of a social work field. If you can connect with someone, right? If you can kind of reach them in that vulnerable state and just kind of let them know that you care and build that relationship with them, that's really all that matters. And that's really the key to kind of getting someone the help that they need. So just that one word of kindness and getting that conversation started is really key to kind of decreasing that stigma against mental health and kind of helping someone when they're struggling. So really that connection, rapport, and relationship building is so important. And you don't have to be a professional. Sometimes we find that teachers or, other professionals have a really high impact on the students and youth that we're working with. They can be in therapy for years. There's that one teacher or, that one professional in the school that just made an impact on them and left that positive statement in their mind where they're like, I can do this. I got this. So I just want you to recognize how important that connection is, and the work that you do, whatever capacity that is in, can have really strong impacts on our young individuals.
Thank you, Rana.
For me, I think the one thing that I would like to have a takeaway is hope. As a parent, that's the big thing for me, is that there's hope, and I want other parents to know that. And it is about connection and communication and support. So hope is mine.
Great one.
My takeaway would be to keep in mind that the way that we define success for a child may be different from one to the next. You know, and that's true for mental health too. You know, each child is going to have very unique situations and different from how they present from one to the next. And so finding out what would be successful for the child, what would help them build their quality of life. It might not be what the societal expectations are for that youth. So, you know, figuring out what their core values are and, you know, what is going to help them feel more successful for themselves, have them define that.
And I think mine would be just this reminding ourselves of grace, both giving it to ourselves and giving it to all of the youth, families, professionals, everybody that we work with, right? I have met very few people either that both like on the professional end of things, but also on the family end of things that weren't trying their best, right? Everybody's doing the best that they can at any given moment in time. And when we remember that, it's a little easier to say, okay, like, maybe things aren't the way we want them right now, but if we can all continue to try to do our best, we can maybe move the needle forward a little bit. So for me, that's a guiding light for me as I do this.
Those are all fantastic takeaways, and I so deeply appreciate all of you panelists for joining us and lending us your expertise and your information, and those perspectives are of what you are seeing and how we can all come together to help improve and find wellness for youth who are struggling with mental health issues. So thank you all panelists for joining us. All the participants, thank you so much for adding questions and for listening in on possibly your lunch hour. I just wanted to say one more time, if you wanted to learn more about how Wraparound Milwaukee and Children's Community Mental Health Services can provide support, there's a number on the screen, a QR code, and a very long website link that we don't expect you to type, which is why the QR code's there. But you're encouraged to call the resource and referral line. That number is displayed on the screen. It's in the chat as well if you want to just copy and paste that into a note somewhere. But otherwise, you can always go to the Milwaukee County website and find this link as well through the search there. So thank you again. Thank you all for taking the time to engage in these important conversations, especially as we are looking at back to school time, which is challenging for all of us, but certainly for youth who are struggling. So thank you again, and everyone, please have a great rest of your day. Thank you.